At the close of World War II, most American veterans returned from the battlefield looking forward to settling down to a peaceful life. But for the returning warriors of Athens, Tennessee, that dream became a nightmare. The men who had vanquished the forces of fascism overseas were now confronted by a new enemy at home, a local government rife with corruption and abuse. The conflict that followed pitted an entrenched political machine against an armed citizenry fed up with their overlords. It was known as the Battle of Athens, and it's the topic of tonight's Real History.
Athens, Tennessee in the mid-40s was the county seat of McMinn County. It had always been a hotbed of political dissent and political eruption. By 1940, the problem was that there was a political machine and they were pretty much dominating the lives of the people. People that would come through town on buses or trains could be regularly pulled off and beaten up, accused of some crime and thrown into jail. The more prisoners that went into jail, the more money that went into the sheriff's budget. There would have been all kinds of moonshine stills and illegal liquor, and so the sheriff would have gained money from them. There were all kinds of activities in which these male deputies almost had free reign of the female population. There was a large part of the male population that was away at war. It became a common theme by war's end, wait till the boys get back. It was like there was a kind of a crescendo of emotion that was building as these men began to drift back in after the war. There may have been a time in which they thought this was business as usual, but you had these men coming back saying, "We fought for liberty in Europe and the Pacific." The men were encouraged to form a political party. The party was called the GI Nonpartisan Party. Election day was August the 2nd, 1946. The election was for all of the county offices, primarily and of most importance, the office of sheriff. The veterans had put a person forward on their nonpartisan ticket by the name of Knox Henry. And Knox Henry was kind of a grand figure. He was almost a John Wayne type person. And so he was the kind of person who would have garnered a lot of votes. Now, that being said, the political establishment kept saying to themselves that all they had to do was to control the ballot boxes. And so you had poll watchers, and these poll watchers would have been there from the establishment. Those were usually deputies, and they were usually armed. There would have been other poll watchers that would have come from the GI party, and those would have been veterans that were in there watching the votes. The first most dramatic event occurred on one of the main streets of Athens. Two of the GI watchers, a man named Shy Scott and a man named David Vestal, were in there with these deputies. There was a man in the community named Tom Gillespie. Tom Gillespie was an older African-American man. He was much beloved. He was highly respected. Immediately, these tough, ugly deputies feel like that's someone that they can easily not let vote. And so they push him back. And Tom Gillespie, very heroically, determines that he is going to vote. Finally, he's warned that if he doesn't leave, he's going to be shot. And at that moment, he says, "I've come to vote. It's my right." And one of the deputies produces a gun and shoots Tom Gillespie on the spot. The deputies immediately shut down the precinct, and they are holding the two poll watchers captive inside the precinct. All of a sudden, you can hear sirens coming, and the sheriff and a whole group of heavily armed deputies come in, push the crowds back, and begin to clear out the ballot boxes and move them to the jail. Word is then spread throughout the county that voting precincts are to be shut down and ballot boxes are beginning to be brought to the jail. And so suddenly it's put up or shut up time. The sheriff and the deputies have barricaded themselves, heavily armed, in the county jail. It's like a fortress almost. A man named Mink Powers stepped in and took a leadership role, and he made it possible for some keys to the armory to show up. And so veterans began to go to the armory and began to bring weapons down to town. If you saw the kind of layout of the town, there is a small ridge that looks down over the area where the jail was. So of course these soldiers knew that that gave them tactical advantage that was just unbelievable. Everything was totally quiet. Everything had suddenly gotten dark. And gunfire erupts from the jail. That firing goes on for probably about 3 hours. I mean, it was like the Alamo almost in our TV images. A veteran that had been involved with munitions in the war taped together several sticks of dynamite. The dynamite blew off the whole front of the jail. And all of a sudden the people in the jail believe this thing's been raised to a new level. So you literally have a white flag that is rigged and stuck out of the jail windows, and the people in the jail surrender. By the time that the next morning occurs, the veterans, the people from the business community in town, they were able to count the votes. The election was not even close. The Veterans GI Nonpartisan Party won by a majority. The legacy of these events are manifold. By the time that you get to the political events of 1948, there are numerous events like what happened at Athens that are repeated across the country. The GI Nonpartisan Party came very close to being the first vital third-party movement in America to really become successful.